Welcome everybody back to Friar Talk. Today, we're going to be giving you guys 3 trades that the Padres should make as soon as they possibly can. 3 different candidates here, going to be going over each of them. I will start out with my guy. Chase will go do his guy, and then Isaac will do his guy to wrap it up. As we do them, we'll each talk about them real quick, but probably only a couple minutes per each of these trades. If there's any trade candidates that you guys really like, make sure to comment those below. If you aren't already subscribed, subscribe. If you haven't hit like yet, hit like as well. Helps the channel a lot. But with that said, 3 trade candidates that the Padres should make a trade for as soon as they can. I'm going to start it off. I'm going to be going with Anthony Santander. Now, if you guys don't know too much about him, he is a corner outfielder for the Orioles. I don't want to say he had a career year last year, but it probably was his career year, but he's just been a really consistent player for many seasons now. He's basically a lock to be like around a 450 slugging percentage. He's like mid to high OPS every year. He's not the best outfielder, but he can play right or left. So if the Padres wanted to potentially move Soto to left field, you could put Santander in right, and he will be a better right fielder than Juan Soto. So he's not a good defender, but he's not like that bad. But in terms of offensive production, he has pretty good power. He gets on base at a pretty high. He doesn't get on base at a very high clip, but he has that slugging percentage. Last season, he hit 33 bombs. And that was the biggest reason for why this was his best year, because in past seasons, he had hit around 20 before. But this was the first season where he got to have a lot of plate appearances, where in past seasons, he was usually only getting like 400 plate appearances max. This year, he got almost 650. So it was like his first year where he could be like full-time starter playing every day. And honestly, he was a lot of the reason that the Orioles actually weren't an awful team last season. So I really like the idea of bringing him in. We saw the Teoscar Hernandez trade earlier today. And that was one where it looks like this outfielder market isn't going to be that crazy. So Chase, I know that you have an outfielder too, and we'll get to him in a second. But that's probably a lot of the reason that we're going to be talking about corner outfield here, just because the Padres could go re-sign a guy like Jurickson Profar at $16 million a year for like 3-4 years, or they could get Santander under control for 2 years at $7 million a piece, and he's probably going to put up a better season than Profar did last year when it was Profar's career year. So I like Santander a lot. I think he's really consistent. I think you kind of know exactly what you're going to get from him. Obviously, it's baseball, like anything can happen, but in terms of like projecting it as best as possible, you probably want to go for a guy that's consistently around the same season every year and not super up, super down, like all over the place. So that's why I like Santander a lot. Also, pretty cheap option in terms of trade capital. But what do you guys think about bringing in Anthony Santander?
I agree with it. I honestly don't think Profar is worth the money that he's going to be getting paid, and you fill in that role. Defensively, it might be a slight downgrade, but offensively, you're getting a better bat with more power, and that's sort of what the Padres were missing throughout the entire year last year, and you plug that right in. The only downside is he doesn't play center. I think he's just a corner outfielder by heart. So, especially with kind of how spacious Petco is, he's definitely probably going to be stuck in left field and Juan Soto in right. So, you're just looking at a left fielder, which isn't bad. 33 home runs is a lot. That would be what, second on the Padres last year, I think, because Soto didn't have that many. I think he was in his 20s. Machado over 30. I think, yeah, he would have been second on the team in home runs, which would have been very helpful considering we did not score a lot of runs outside of home runs. So I think it's a good trade.
Yeah, one of the bigger things that we preached last offseason was the Padres need to hit for some power. And I mean, they made it a long ways without hitting for too much power. I feel like they hit for a lot of power in the playoffs. But yeah, adding 33 home runs is something big. I don't know what it would cost. I don't know what his contract looks like or anything. But in terms of just raw power and filling a need, really, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of contract, it'd be $7 million a piece. So, or $7 million this year, and then he'd be in arbitration one other year. So probably you're assuming it'd be around that. But trade capital, it can't be more than the Hernandez trade, and that wasn't even that crazy. So I don't think it costs too much. But Chase, who's your second guy that you want to bring up?
I'm gonna stick with Matt here. Like you said earlier, I'm going outfielder. I am choosing Ian Happ. He is just an outfielder in general. Cubs. He has the potential to play center field, but I believe he played mostly left last year. Looking at his stats, he had 17 home runs last year. He had a 440 slugging and 342 on base. So 782 OPS, which is really solid. Would have been light years ahead of Grisham. I think Grisham only hit a few less home runs, but the slugging is completely different just because Grisham never got on base. He had a 79 percentile in outs above average, so he's actually really good in the outfield. His outfielder jump is average, and if you just looked at his baseball savant page, it's pretty average in most statistical slugging. He's above average in chase rate, sprint speed, average exit. He was in the 93rd percentile of max exit velocity. His velocity topped out at 114, which was 7% or top 7% in the league. So you get a guy who can slug the ball, who can play all three outfield positions, and he's going to be making a little bit more money. He's still going to be making less money than Profar, ironically, because he's going to be in his arbitration year. He's predicted around $10 to $11 million. Profar, I believe, is at 15, 16 per year. So he'd be on like a 1-year deal or thing until you can get another center fielder. That's if you trade Grisham away. But it would be a guy that can play all three outfield positions, not just one. And I think that's where his value truly comes in, because realistically, we don't want to be stuck with Grisham for a whole nother season if he's going to put up the same numbers offensively as he did last season.
Yeah, it makes sense, man. I mean, Ian Happ he was a trade candidate last year. I don't know why him and Wilson Contreras didn't get traded. I feel like the Cubs could have got a decent haul out of both of them. But I can imagine Ian Happ's going to be back on the trade market. And both of those guys you guys brought up, Santander and Happ, they both feel a need. You got Juan Soto out there, and that's kind of like the only guy you got solidified out there. You could say Trent Grisham, but realistically, we don't know what's going to happen with Trent Grisham. Do the Padres see him in their future plans, or do they think he's better off elsewhere? Do they think they can fix him at the plate? Because clearly his glove doesn't need any fixing. He's on his second Gold Glove. He was the best center fielder in the NL if you look at all the numbers. So I don't really know what they think about him at the plate. And when you look at it, it's a guy who struggles with fastballs, who doesn't make the most contact. This is Joey Gallo light. And maybe AJ Preller kind of likes that. I don't know. But you can't really undermine the value of Trent Grisham, at least on the field. Because at the plate, you can definitely say, yeah, that's pretty bad. So I think there's upside there. I don't know if it's worth keeping, but that's going to be up to the Padres. Now, when it comes to Ian Happ, if they don't think he's part of their future plans, Ian Happ makes a lot of sense for the reason that he was primarily the center fielder, I believe, in Chicago. So that fills an immediate need right there, and you get an upgrade at the plate. So, and I think he was an all-star, so even more incentive. I think he was an all-star.
Yeah, I mean, Happ had one of his better years. I think the difference between Happ and Santander is that if you trade for Happ, the big plus is, okay, it's a lot easier to move Grisham. Like and the big question is, like, do people really want Grisham? Because I see a lot of people think that he has no value. I still think he's going to have a lot of value. He has 2 Gold Gloves, and people are going to think they can fix him. People always think that they can fix players' swings. Oh, it's just something like this, and then that's the case. I don't really think he's that fixable. He's never been able to hit fastballs. I don't think that's going to change. And I think that's where he really has a hole in his game. But for center field, I mean, you can throw Happ in there. And then also, if you do want to move Fernando to center field, it's not like you only have Fernando and Azocar as like 2 options there. You actually have another guy, where if you have Santander, it becomes a little bit harder to have full faith in if you move Trent Grisham. Like, you're going to have to be like, yep, Tatis is going to be full-time center fielder. And I don't know if they're going to want to do that. So I think that's the big difference. In terms of offensive production, Santander hits for more power, Happ gets on base more. That's the big difference. But they honestly are pretty similar when it comes to overall offensive output, I would say. And then the other thing is 2 years for Santander, 1 year for Happ. That's the other difference as well. Also, I think Happ would cost a little bit more just because I think he's a little bit better probably, or viewed as a little bit better. But yeah, so Isaac, final guy you want to bring up?
Yeah, mine's a little more of a bigger swing. But to a team that I think is going to be willing to take less, because even if Sean Manaea didn't put up the numbers we expected, we only had to give up a mid-level and a very low-level prospect. Though, this guy, you're getting him with 3 years left of arbitration, so he's going to be controllable through 2025, coming off a 5-WAR season, and has all the potential in the world to be an all-star catcher. With a 122 WRC plus, it is Sean Murphy, catcher from the Oakland A's. He's a defensive pro. I mean, he's one of the best defensive catchers in all of baseball. And that's kind of, Austin Nola is an amazing defensive catcher. He's solid at calling games, but the thing is he's not very good at throwing guys out. But when you look at Sean Murphy's baseball savant, I think he's in like the 93rd percentile in terms of pop time and framing. He's in the 91st percentile. So you're getting an amazing defensive catcher who can also hit for some power. 18 home runs isn't too much, but his slugging percentage is like 439, 449, something like that. I know it's only like 20 or 30 points lower than the top catcher on the market, which is Wilson Contreras. So I think Sean Murphy would be a huge upgrade. And the reason I say Sean Murphy is because, like, all right, you could probably throw Luis Campusano in that trade and maybe like another prospect or two, and you could probably escape that deal. And the reason I say Luis Campusano is because, he has the ability to hit bombs and stuff, but it's getting harder and harder for me to believe that the Padres really have him in their future plans. And I think the A's are one of those teams that think, all right, this guy has all the upside in the world, at least at the plate. Let's go get him. So I think Luis Campusano would be an intriguing piece for the A's in terms of their cheap team. They can get a cheap guy that can actually end up being pretty good. And what do we get out of it? We get a defensive pro. I mean, a guy that, I'm trying to put the freaking words together, has defensive prowess. That's what I was looking for. He has defensive prowess for 3 years. He has experience with Bob Melvin. He put up good numbers this year. I think it was only like a 750, 760 OPS or something like that, but 122 WRC plus, 18 home runs. How many home runs did we get out of Austin Nola last year? 2, 3, 4? I mean, 14 more home runs. That's a pretty massive upgrade. I don't know what his expected home runs would be in Petco Park, but rounds out the lineup very well, helps the pitchers. I mean, this is a guy that you can get, maybe not for cheap, but you're going to get him at a premium position for years to come. I think we all know that backstops are maybe the most important position on the field outside of the pitcher. So I'm all in on Sean Murphy, man. I think he would be a huge add for sure. But the only problem is he might cost a lot.
Yeah, I think he would definitely cost a lot, but also at the same time, he's a guy that he's the best of anyone that we've mentioned. Would be a way bigger piece to add than Happ or Santander or a lot of guys that people are bringing up. He is also pretty cheap right now. He's estimated to make 3.3 million, and he's under control for the next 3 seasons. So it's probably going to cost a lot. It's probably going to be similar to the trade that the Padres made for Austin Nola back in the day, if not more expensive. But yeah, I think that there's reason to believe that he could get moved. The only thing that makes me feel like he's going to cost more than what you're saying, Isaac, because like I was thinking that earlier too, but think about the Padres situation. If you were to trade for Murphy, right, you would probably include Campusano in that deal, and then you'd probably make a like another trade where you move Nola to someone else. And I started thinking about like, well, there's probably a lot of teams that would covet Nola because of how bad catchers are around the league. And then I was like, wait a second. That means there's going to be a lot more teams that want Sean Murphy. So the asking price is going to be that much higher, in my opinion. That's my only thing. But in terms of the player, I mean, looking at Austin Nola's baseball savant compared to Sean Murphy, you see why it would be such a massive upgrade. Pop-up time and framing for Sean Murphy was 96 and 84 percentile. For Austin Nola, it was 20 and 30 percentile. So it is drastically different. Now, cool thing about Nola is that he also does call a really good game, and we hear about all the chemistry with the pitchers, but like you're probably gonna be able to replicate that in Sean Murphy. Murphy, if you acquire him, he's 28 right now. You have him for 3 more years. You probably are thinking like when he's in arbitration to extend him for a longer contract. That's another thing with him. Like he could be a guy that you get, you immediately extend for like 5 years or something like that. And you're like, this is our future catcher for this amount of time. I could totally see that. And then you probably feel like you kind of lock down an extremely important position where if you're looking at it both defensively and offensively, he's one of the best catchers in the game. Real Muto, of course, is better, but like you start looking at it, it's like people bring up Contreras as a better catcher than him. I think Contreras is pretty awful behind the plate. So you bring in like, okay, he's that elite of a defender, and he's still, I mean, look at his 4 seasons in terms of just OPS. He's progressively went down, but it's like it's still good. 899 OPS, but he only had 60 plate appearances. 821, 711, 758. Like, dude, that's still really good for a catcher. Like, if you're looking at catchers last season, Austin Nola wasn't even that bad, and he had a 650 OPS. Like, he had no power at all. This guy can actually hit like really well, and he's elite. So I think that if you're gonna go for a home run, I think he's a great guy to go for. And it's kind of like weird. You don't really hear people talking about that. And we even talked about it before. We don't really love the idea of upgrading catcher, but if it's Sean Murphy, I think that's a different story.
I do think it's a different story. The little aggression kind of makes me worry, just because for some reason, whenever players get traded to the Padres, they always end up doing worse than what they were really doing. I mean, look at Juan Soto. He was the slugging outfielder, the next Ted Williams. How many home runs did he hit with the Padres? I think I can count on one hand. 4 or 5, right? We don't have a hitting coach. Michael Badar left. We have to refill that role once again. We're going to have to upgrade the analytics department. We're going to have to get more than one hitting coach, hopefully. So as much as I want to trade for another catcher, that's the only thing that worries me is like you mentioned the regression, which it's not too bad. 750 is amazing for a catcher, but Petco Park was the least friendly hitter park in the entire MLB. I mean, we saw it outside of Manny Machado. I think the next highest home runs was like 17. I'm only counting that just because Juan Soto was on the team from August and he hit 5 home runs and he was already at like 20 something. So I'm not counting that. I think he had 2 in Petco. So there's going to be even more regression from that. I think it's a really solid move because, one, he's great defensively. The framing part is out of this world. I mean, that's like Austin Hedges, but he can actually hit. I mean, Austin Hedges, when he could actually hit in the minor leagues, was like an MVP. I mean, that is a miracle waiting to happen. And I would love to actually have that. But that is my only concern is anymore. So I think it's a good idea, though. It's definitely a home run swing.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's any other guys that you guys are thinking about, if you guys want us to do a pitcher episode, because we only brought up bats right now. We've talked about Senga. We've talked about Martinez potentially being a starter. But if you guys want us to do kind of one where we talk about guys like Pablo Lopez or other people that are on the market, there's definitely pitchers as well. So we could do that one as well. But comment any other hitters, any other guys that you're like, oh, the Padres got to go get this guy in free agency, and we can definitely do things on him because we want to keep looking at kind of all the options. And then once the rumors start piling in and stuff like that, we'll make sure to be on top of all that stuff. But with that said, I think that's going to do it. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you all very soon.